Imagine an empire that lasted over 600 years, stretching across 3 continents, controlling trade between Europe and Asia, and shaping the fate of kings and civilizations alike. This was the Ottoman Empire, a force so powerful that its legacy still echoes in today's world. The Ottoman Empire, which spanned over 6 centuries from the late 13th century to the early 20th century, remains one of the most remarkable empires in world history. It bridged Europe and Asia, blending diverse cultures, religions, and traditions under a single political authority. Its influence was profound, politically, militarily, culturally, and economically. At its zenith, the empire controlled vast territories across Southeast Europe, Western Asia, and North Africa, influencing trade, diplomacy, and warfare across 3 continents. What set the Ottomans apart was not merely their territorial conquests, but their innovative governance, flexible administrative systems, and adaptability to internal and external challenges. From a small Anatolian principality founded by Osman I, the Ottoman state grew into a world power that challenged European monarchies, confronted rival Muslim empires, and shaped the course of history for centuries. This essay traces the empire from its foundation to the fall of Constantinople in 1453, exploring its early rulers, military campaigns, social and political structures, and the cultural foundations that would allow it to flourish for centuries. Foundation and early expansion, 1299 to 1453. Osman I and the birth of a beylik. The Ottoman Empire began as a small principality in northwestern Anatolia, centered around the town of Sogut during a period of political fragmentation following the decline of the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum. Osman I, RT 1299 to 1326, the dynasty's founder, was a local leader of the Kai tribe, known for his strategic vision, charismatic leadership, and ability to unite disparate Turkish clans. Osman's initial aim was survival and consolidation in a volatile region where Byzantine and other Anatolian beyliks vied for power. However, his foresight and military skill allowed him to expand beyond his immediate territory, laying the foundation for an enduring empire. The title Osman itself would become the dynasty's namesake, giving rise to the term Ottoman. Early conquests and consolidation under Osman I and his successors, the early Ottoman state expanded methodically. Key early victories included the capture of neighboring fortresses and towns, which provided economic resources, strategic positions, and manpower. The Ottomans employed flexible strategies, including guerrilla-style raids, diplomacy, and alliances, allowing them to survive against stronger neighbors. In 1326, Orhan, Osman's son and successor, captured Bursa, a significant Byzantine city, and established it as the empire's first capital. This marked the transition from a tribal principality to a state capable of administering urban populations and resources. Bursa became not only a political center, but also a hub for trade, crafts, and culture, signaling the Ottomans' rising influence. Entry into Europe. Gallipoli and Balkan expansion. The Ottomans' strategic entry into Europe began in 1354 with the conquest of Gallipoli. This was facilitated by a devastating earthquake that weakened the local Byzantine garrison. Gallipoli became the Ottomans' first foothold in Europe, opening the way for subsequent campaigns into the Balkans. By the late 14th century, the Ottomans had extended their influence across Thrace, Macedonia, and parts of Serbia and Bulgaria. Their victory at the Battle of Kosovo in 1389 against a coalition of Balkan forces solidified their dominance in the region. This battle, while costly, demonstrated the Ottomans' military resilience and the effectiveness of their centralized command structure. The fall of Constantinople. Mehmed II and the rise of Istanbul, the ultimate symbol of Ottoman ambition and power, came under Mehmed II, rule 1451 to 1481. Known as Mehmed the Conqueror, he inherited a state poised for expansion, but still confronted by the Byzantine Empire in Constantinople. The city, with its massive walls and strategic location on the Bosporus, represented both a symbolic and practical barrier to Ottoman dominance in the region. In 1453, after a meticulous campaign involving artillery, naval blockades, and strategic siege tactics, Mehmed II captured Constantinople. This conquest not only ended the Byzantine Empire, but also transformed the Ottomans into a global power. Constantinople was renamed Istanbul and became the new imperial capital, a center of trade, administration, and culture that connected Europe and Asia like never before. The capture of Constantinople symbolized the culmination of more than 150 years of Ottoman expansion, laying the groundwork for centuries of dominance across 3 continents. It also marked the beginning of the Ottomans' role as a central player in European and Middle Eastern politics. Conclusion of early expansion. By 1453, the Ottomans had transitioned from a small Anatolian beylik to a formidable empire. Their early success was due to a combination of military innovation, strategic vision, flexible governance, and the ability to integrate conquered populations. The foundation laid by Osman I and his successors enabled the empire to endure, adapt, and eventually flourish during its classical period. The stage was now set for the golden age of the Ottoman Empire, which would see unprecedented expansion, cultural achievements, and administrative sophistication under rulers such as Suleiman the Magnificent. Consolidation under Mehmed II, 1453 to 1481. Following the conquest of Constantinople in 1453, Mehmed II, known as the Conqueror, faced the immense task of consolidating the empire and transforming it from a collection of diverse territories into a centralized, cohesive state. The city itself had been depopulated due to war and plague. Mehmed initiated policies to repopulate and revitalize Istanbul. He encouraged immigration from across the empire, offering tax incentives and housing to artisans, merchants, scholars, and craftsmen. Administratively, Mehmed II created a bureaucratic system that combined traditional Islamic governance with innovative institutions adapted from Byzantine and Turkic models. He codified laws, strengthened the Divan, Council of Ministers, and expanded the use of provincial governors, sanjaks and beys to enforce imperial authority. The centralized governance allowed the Ottomans to efficiently collect taxes, maintain order, and coordinate military campaigns. Militarily, Mehmed continued to innovate. The Janissary Corps, originally elite infantry recruited through the Deşerm system, became a disciplined and professional force capable of executing complex siege and field operations. Mehmed also recognized the strategic importance of naval power, commissioning a fleet to control the Bosporus and the Aegean Sea, ensuring dominance over maritime trade routes. Bayezid II and internal stability, 1481 to 1512. After Mehmed's death, his son Bayezid II focused on internal stability and consolidation rather than aggressive expansion. He inherited an empire with diverse populations and fragile frontiers, and his reign was characterized by careful diplomacy and administrative refinement. Bayezid worked to suppress regional rebellions, strengthen the legal system, and enhance the empire's economic foundations. Bayezid's era also saw the flourishing of Ottoman culture. Art, calligraphy, and architecture received state patronage. Notable architects and scholars, including the early development of classical Ottoman architecture, contributed to the growing cultural identity of the empire. Although Bayezid avoided major wars, his careful diplomacy preserved the empire's strength, setting the stage for the expansionist policies of his successor, Selim I. Selim I and the expansion into the Middle East, 1512 to 1520. Selim I, nicknamed the Grim, dramatically transformed the Ottoman Empire through military campaigns and territorial expansion. Unlike his father, Selim aggressively sought to extend Ottoman control over the Muslim world, particularly the Middle East. His most notable campaigns were against the Safavid Empire in Persia and the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt. The Battle of Chaldiran, 1514, against Shah Ismail I of the Safavids, secured eastern Anatolia and established Ottoman dominance over parts of the Caucasus. Following this, Selim turned his attention to Egypt. In 1517, he defeated the Mamluks at the Battle of Redania, gaining control over Egypt, the Levant, and the Hejaz region, including the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. This conquest elevated the Ottoman sultans as leaders of the Sunni Islamic world and gave them control over lucrative trade routes linking the Mediterranean, Red Sea, and Indian Ocean. Selim I's reign also consolidated the empire's legal and administrative framework. He relied on highly capable viziers and strengthened central authority, ensuring that new territories were effectively integrated into the empire. Suleiman the Magnificent and the zenith of Ottoman power, 1520 to 1566. The reign of Suleiman I, known as Suleiman the Magnificent in the West, and Kanuni, lawgiver, in the Ottoman realm, represents the apex of Ottoman political, military, and cultural power. Suleiman inherited an empire poised for expansion, and his reign was marked by both military conquest and domestic reform. Territorial expansion. Suleiman extended Ottoman territories in Europe, Asia, and Africa. In Europe, campaigns against the Habsburgs and the Hungarian kingdom brought key regions under Ottoman control. The Battle of Mohacs, 1526, decisively defeated the Kingdom of Hungary, allowing the Ottomans to assert influence over Central Europe. Attempts to capture Vienna in 1529, while ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrated the empire's reach and military sophistication. In the Mediterranean, the Ottomans under Suleiman challenged Venetian and Spanish dominance. Naval commanders like Hayreddin Barbarossa secured Ottoman supremacy in the eastern Mediterranean, consolidating control over trade routes and coastal territories. In the Middle East, Suleiman strengthened Ottoman rule over Iraq, the Levant, and the Arabian Peninsula, solidifying the gains of Selim I. Administrative and legal reforms. Suleiman is renowned for his legislative reforms, which earned him the title lawgiver. He codified laws covering criminal justice, taxation, land tenure, and administrative practices, harmonizing Sharia, Islamic law, with the Qanun, secular legal code. This system provided consistency across diverse territories and populations, enabling effective governance over a vast empire. He also restructured the provincial administration, balancing central authority with local autonomy. The Sanjak and Vilayet systems allowed provincial governors to manage affairs efficiently while remaining accountable to the Sultan. This bureaucratic sophistication contributed to internal stability, even as the empire expanded. Cultural flourishing. Suleiman's reign was a golden age of Ottoman culture. Architecture, arts, and scholarship flourished under imperial patronage. Master architect Mimar Sinan constructed iconic structures, including mosques, bridges, and palaces, blending Islamic and Byzantine influences. Literature, poetry, and historical chronicles thrived, reflecting the empire's rich cultural identity. The period also saw the growth of trade networks, urban centers, and educational institutions, reinforcing Ottoman dominance not only politically, but culturally. Military innovations. Suleiman's military was highly organized and technologically advanced. The Janissaries remained an elite infantry force, while cavalry and artillery units were deployed strategically across land and sea campaigns. Siege warfare techniques, including the use of massive cannons at Vienna and Belgrade, demonstrated Ottoman engineering capabilities. Suleiman's navy, led by commanders like Barbarossa, expanded Ottoman influence into North Africa and the Mediterranean, creating a maritime empire that rivaled European powers. Conflicts and diplomacy. The classical period was also marked by intense conflicts and diplomacy. The Ottomans clashed repeatedly with the Habsburg Empire, Safavid Persia, and Italian city-states, balancing warfare with strategic alliances. Treaties such as the Treaty of Constantinople, 1533, with Persia, stabilized eastern borders, while Mediterranean diplomacy ensured trade and political influence. The Ottomans skillfully combined military might with negotiation, creating a flexible and resilient empire. Conclusion of the classical period. By the early 17th century, the Ottoman Empire had become a formidable global power, controlling territories from the Danube to the Persian Gulf and from North Africa to the Arabian Peninsula. The foundation laid by Mehmed II, expanded by Selim I, and perfected under Suleiman the Magnificent, created an empire with unmatched military, political, and cultural sophistication. The classical period represents the zenith of Ottoman power, where governance, law, military, and culture were harmonized to create a resilient empire capable of facing external threats and internal challenges. It set the standard for centuries of Ottoman rule, establishing patterns that would endure long after Suleiman's reign. Political structure, governance, and society, 1606 to 1792. By the early 17th century, the Ottoman Empire had reached its territorial and military peak, yet sustaining such a vast empire required sophisticated governance. The classical system that had worked under Mehmed II and Suleiman the Magnificent began showing signs of strain. Internal corruption, provincial autonomy, and growing economic challenges threatened stability. Despite these challenges, the empire developed a resilient administrative structure and social system capable of managing its diverse population. This chapter examines the political institutions, administrative mechanisms, social hierarchies, and reforms that enabled the empire to survive for centuries. Central authority. The Sultan and the imperial court. The Sultan remained the absolute authority, combining political, military, and religious leadership. Known as the Caliph of Islam after Selim I, the Sultan's role extended beyond governance to spiritual leadership. His authority was reinforced by a hierarchical bureaucracy and a cadre of trusted advisors, including Grand Vizier, the chief executive responsible for implementing policies, commanding armies, and overseeing the administration. Divan, the imperial council composed of viziers and officials who advised the Sultan and managed state affairs. Qadi, judges who applied Sharia law across provinces. Defterdar, treasurer in charge of finances, taxation, and budgeting. The Sultan's authority was theoretically absolute, but in practice, it depended on maintaining loyalty among the military provincial governors and influential court factions. During periods of weak sultans, viziers often gained significant power, provincial governance, and decentralization. To manage its vast territories, the empire was divided into provinces, eyalets or vilayets, each administered by a governor, beylerbey or pasha. Provincial governors had significant autonomy in collecting taxes, maintaining order, and organizing local militias. The sanjak system subdivided provinces into smaller districts, each overseen by a sanjak bey. While this structure allowed the empire to govern diverse regions, it also contributed to decentralization. Provincial elites could accumulate local power, occasionally challenging central authority. This tension between centralization and local autonomy was a defining feature of the Ottoman political system during the 17th and 18th centuries. The beylik system and religious organization. One of the most distinctive features of Ottoman governance was the millet system, which organized subjects based on religious communities. Each millet, for example, Orthodox Christians, Armenian Christians, Jews, had internal autonomy under its religious leader. Greek Orthodox Christians were led by the Patriarch of Constantinople. Armenians had their own patriarch and judicial systems. Jews were organized under the Hakam Bashi. A millet system allowed the empire to govern a religiously diverse population effectively. Communities managed their internal affairs, including education, taxation, and personal law, while remaining loyal to the Sultan. This system minimized conflict, promoted coexistence, and helped integrate non-Muslim populations into the empire. Military organization and challenges. By the 17th century, the Ottoman military was showing both strength and weaknesses. Key elements included janissaries, elite infantry recruited through the devshirme system. Initially, a disciplined and loyal force, but later plagued by corruption, nepotism, and resistance to modernization. Sipahi cavalry, land-holding cavalry responsible for local defense and supporting the central army. Artillery and fortifications. Siege warfare remained a core Ottoman military skill, and artillery technology continued to evolve. Despite past victories, the empire suffered military setbacks against the Habsburgs, Safavids, and emerging European powers. Stagnation in military training and technology became apparent, creating pressure for reform in later centuries. Legal and administrative systems. The Ottomans relied on a dual legal system. Sharia, Islamic law, governed personal matters such as marriage, inheritance, and religious practice. Qanun, sultanic law, secular laws enacted by the Sultan to regulate taxation, land tenure, military obligations, and criminal law. Judges, qadis, applied Sharia, while provincial administrators enforced the Qanun. This combination allowed flexibility and consistency, ensuring governance across vast and culturally diverse territories. Central and provincial bureaucracies were supported by scribes, tax collectors, and local administrators. Revenue was primarily derived from agriculture, trade, and land tenure systems, though corruption and mismanagement increasingly strained finances. Economic and social structure. The Ottoman economy was largely agrarian, with Timar land grants given to soldiers in exchange for military service. Cities were centers of trade, crafts, and administration. Major trade hubs included Istanbul, capital and key international port; Bursa and Edirne, early cultural and administrative centers; Aleppo and Cairo, regional trade nodes connecting Europe, Africa, and Asia; guilds organized artisans and merchants, regulating production, quality, and trade. The empire's strategic position along major trade routes allowed it to control the flow of goods between Europe and Asia, generating significant revenue. Socially, the empire was hierarchical but flexible. The ruling elite, sultans, viziers, military officers, held political power, while artisans, merchants, peasants, and religious communities formed the broader population. Mobility was possible, especially through military service or bureaucratic appointments, allowing talented individuals to rise. And challenges of the 17th and 18th centuries. Despite its strong institutions, the empire faced internal and external challenges. Political fragmentation. Provincial governors and janissary factions increasingly asserted local autonomy. Military stagnation. European armies modernized faster, and Ottoman forces struggled to keep pace. Economic strain. Competition from European trade routes and inflation weakened state finances. Peasant revolts and social unrest. Heavy taxation and conscription led to local uprisings. Diplomatic pressures. Rising European powers sought influence in Ottoman territories, particularly in the Balkans and Mediterranean. These challenges did not immediately topple the empire, but signaled the beginning of a slow decline that would require reforms in the following centuries. Conclusion. Between 1606 and 1792, the Ottoman Empire demonstrated remarkable resilience. Its complex political structure, efficient provincial governance, and adaptive social systems allowed it to maintain authority over diverse populations despite internal and external pressures. The millet system ensured religious coexistence, while the legal and administrative frameworks provided stability. However, underlying weaknesses, military stagnation, economic pressures, and provincial autonomy highlighted the need for reform. These issues would set the stage for the transformative reforms of the 19th century, as sultans and reformers sought to modernize the empire to compete with emerging European powers. By the late 18th century, the Ottoman Empire faced profound internal and external challenges. Centuries of territorial expansion, military conquest, and centralized governance had left the empire administratively and militarily sophisticated. But it now confronted stagnation, corruption, and external pressures. European powers had modernized economically and militarily, leaving the Ottomans struggling to compete. The empire's response to these challenges marked the modern era of Ottoman history, a period of reform, resistance, and eventual dissolution. This chapter explores the major reforms, internal political movements, territorial losses, and the ultimate collapse of the Ottoman Empire. Early reform attempts. Nizam-e-Sadid, 1792 to 1808. The first significant attempt to modernize the Ottoman state came under Sultan Selim III with the Nizam-e-Sadid New Order reforms. Selim recognized that the empire's military was outdated compared to European powers. The reforms focused on military modernization, creation of new European-style regiments trained in modern tactics, administrative reform, streamlining taxation and provincial governance, economic policies, promoting trade, reducing corruption, and improving revenue collection. Despite the promise of these reforms, Selim III faced resistance from entrenched interests, particularly the Janissaries, who saw their privileges threatened. In 1807, a Janissary-led revolt forced Selim III's deposition and assassination, demonstrating the difficulties of top-down reform in a resistant society. Mahmud II and centralization, 1808 to 1839. Succeeding Selim III, Sultan Mahmud II initiated a more radical reform program. He recognized that military modernization required decisive action. In 1826, Mahmud II abolished the Janissary Corps in an event known as the Auspicious Incident, replacing it with a modern, professional army trained along European lines. Mahmud II also centralized authority, curbing provincial autonomy and enhancing the bureaucratic system. He restructured taxation, improved infrastructure, and encouraged Western-style education. These reforms strengthened central control and laid the groundwork for the Tanzimat reforms of the mid-19th century. Tanzimat reforms, 1839 to 1876. The Tanzimat period, meaning reorganization, was a systematic modernization effort aimed at preventing further decline and integrating the empire into the modern international order. Key reforms included legal reforms, introduction of codified civil and criminal laws based on European models while retaining Sharia principles, administrative reforms, standardization of provincial governance, and improved fiscal administration, military reforms, expansion and modernization of the army, including European-style training and organization, education and infrastructure, establishment of secular schools, universities, and improved communication networks, equality and citizenship. Reforms attempted to guarantee equal rights for all subjects, regardless of religion, in order to strengthen loyalty and reduce internal divisions. The Tanzimat reforms were ambitious, but implementation was uneven. Local resistance, financial constraints, and European interference limited their effectiveness. Nevertheless, they represented a critical shift toward modernization and centralization. Ottoman Constitution and the Young Turks, 1876 to 1908. In 1876, Sultan Abdul Hamid II promulgated the first Ottoman constitution, establishing a parliament and introducing limited representative governance. However, Abdul Hamid soon suspended the constitution and ruled autocratically, citing external threats and internal instability. By the early 20th century, dissatisfaction with autocratic rule led to the rise of the Young Turks, a reformist political movement advocating constitutionalism, secularization, and modernization. The Young Turk Revolution of 1908 restored the constitution, ushering in a period of political activism, nationalist movements, and attempts to centralize and modernize the empire. While the Young Turks revitalized reform efforts, ethnic tensions and rising nationalism within the empire created new challenges. Wars and territorial losses. The 19th and early 20th centuries were marked by territorial decline. Key conflicts included Russo-Turkish wars. Repeated defeats led to loss of territories in the Balkans and the Caucasus. Balkan Wars, 1912 to 1913. The Ottoman Empire lost nearly all European territories, including Albania, Macedonia, and most of Thrace. World War I, 1914 to 1918. Allied defeat and occupation of strategic territories weakened the empire. Ottoman participation in the Central Powers led to further losses in the Middle East. The empire's shrinking borders reflected both the pressure from modern European powers and the internal difficulties of maintaining control over diverse and restive populations. The end of the Ottoman Empire. The empire's final years were dominated by political upheaval and foreign occupation. After World War I, Armistice of Mudros, 1918, ended hostilities between the Ottoman Empire and the Allies. Allied occupation. Istanbul and key territories were occupied, and the empire was effectively partitioned. Turkish national movement, led by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, resistance movements sought to preserve Turkish sovereignty. In 1922, the Sultanate was abolished, ending the 623-year-old Ottoman Empire. The subsequent establishment of the Republic of Turkey in 1923 marked a new era in Anatolia and the wider Middle East. Legacy of the modern era. Despite its decline, the Ottoman Empire left enduring legacies. Political and administrative, centralized governance models influenced successor states in the Middle East and Balkans. Legal systems, Tanzimat reforms, and the codification of laws influenced modern legal frameworks. Cultural impact, architecture, literature, and arts continued to shape the region's cultural identity. Geopolitical influence. The Ottoman experience shaped European diplomacy, colonial ambitions, and the modern nation-states of the Middle East. The modern era illustrates the empire's ability to adapt through reform, even as external pressures and internal challenges accelerated its dissolution. It stands as a testament to both the resilience and limitations of a centuries-old imperial system in a rapidly changing world. Conclusion. The period from 1792 to 1922 represents the final chapter of the Ottoman Empire, characterized by reform, modernization, and adaptation to global pressures. While ambitious reforms like the Nizam-e-Jadid, Tanzimat, and Young Turk initiatives sought to revive the empire's strength, internal resistance, economic difficulties, and European expansion ultimately led to its collapse. By the early 20th century, the Ottoman Empire had transformed from a powerful, multi-continental empire to a state struggling to maintain sovereignty in a rapidly modernizing world. Its dissolution gave rise to new political realities, including the Republic of Turkey, shaping the Middle East and Europe for the century to come. The military was the backbone of the Ottoman Empire. From its foundation in the late 13th century to its peak under Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottomans relied on a sophisticated and adaptable military system to conquer, govern, and defend a vast empire spanning Europe, Asia, and Africa. The empire's military success was not solely due to the size of its armies, but also to its strategic organization, innovative tactics, and integration of diverse forces. This chapter explores the Ottoman military, including early cavalry and infantry strategies, the elite Janissary Corps, naval power, major wars, and siege techniques. Early cavalry and light infantry strategies. In the early Ottoman period, cavalry played a crucial role in both offense and defense. The Ottomans inherited cavalry traditions from the Seljuks and other Turkic nomads, emphasizing mobility, archery, and speed. The Sipahi cavalry, elite feudal horsemen, granted land, timar, in exchange for military service, formed the core of early Ottoman campaigns. Sipahis were highly disciplined, capable of both shock tactics and reconnaissance, allowing rapid advances into enemy territory. Alongside the cavalry, light infantry units were used for raiding, ambushes, and securing supply lines. These troops, often recruited locally, provided flexibility and could operate in difficult terrain, including Anatolian mountains and Balkan forests. Early Ottoman armies combined cavalry and infantry in coordinated operations, exploiting mobility and strategic surprise rather than relying solely on brute force. This combination of cavalry and light infantry allowed the Ottomans to expand quickly from a small Anatolian principality into a regional power by the late 14th century, successfully confronting Byzantine forces, neighboring beyliks, and Balkan coalitions, Janissaries, and elite corps. One of the Ottoman Empire's most distinctive military innovations was the creation of the Janissary Corps in the late 14th century. Originally recruited through the Devshirme system, where Christian boys were taken from the Balkans, converted to Islam, and trained as soldiers, the Janissaries became the empire's elite infantry force. Key characteristics of the Janissaries included professionalism. Unlike feudal levies, Janissaries were full-time soldiers, highly disciplined and loyal to the Sultan. Firearms expertise. They were early adopters of gunpowder weapons, including muskets and small cannons, making them formidable against traditional cavalry-based armies. Elite status. Janissaries received state salaries, education, and privileges, elevating them above regular soldiers and integrating them into the state bureaucracy. Political influence. Over time, their elite status allowed Janissaries to exert political power, occasionally challenging sultans and influencing succession. Other elite corps included artillery specialists, palace guards, and specialized infantry units. Together, these forces provided the Ottomans with a versatile and modern army capable of conducting complex campaigns across diverse terrains. Naval power in the Mediterranean. While the Ottoman military is often associated with land campaigns, naval power was equally vital for controlling trade routes and projecting power. From the 15th century onward, the Ottomans developed a formidable navy under visionary commanders like Barbarossa Hayreddin Pasha. Key aspects of Ottoman naval strength included shipbuilding and ports. Major shipyards in Istanbul, Gallipoli, and Algiers produced galleys, galleons, and warships suited for Mediterranean combat. Corsairs and privateers. Allied pirates disrupted enemy trade and extended Ottoman influence across North Africa and the Mediterranean. Naval battles. The Ottomans clashed with Venetian, Spanish, and Portuguese fleets, establishing dominance in the eastern Mediterranean by the 16th century. Strategic control of islands and ports. Key territories such as Rhodes, Cyprus, and Crete were conquered or contested to secure maritime routes. And naval power allowed the Ottomans not only to defend coastal territories, but also to support land campaigns in Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, integrating naval and land strategy in a highly effective way. Major wars. The Ottoman Empire engaged in numerous significant wars that shaped its territorial and political expansion. 1. Ottoman-Hungarian Wars. From the late 14th century to the 16th century, the Ottomans frequently clashed with the Kingdom of Hungary. The Battle of Mohacs, 1526, marked a decisive Ottoman victory under Suleiman the Magnificent, resulting in the collapse of Hungary as an independent kingdom and the expansion of Ottoman influence into Central Europe. These wars showcased the Ottomans' effective use of combined arms, cavalry, janissaries, and artillery, and their ability to conduct rapid campaigns over difficult terrain. Ottoman-Venetian Wars. The Ottomans also fought multiple wars against the Republic of Venice, primarily over control of trade routes and strategic ports in the Mediterranean and Aegean Seas. Notable conflicts included the conquest of Rhodes, 1522, and Cyprus, 1570 to 1571. These wars highlighted the importance of naval power and siege expertise, as well as the empire's ambition to dominate maritime commerce. Ottoman Safavid Wars. The eastern frontier was contested by the Safavid Empire, a Shia state in Persia. Major battles, such as the Battle of Chaldiran, 1514, under Selim I, established Ottoman control over eastern Anatolia and northern Iraq. These campaigns tested the Ottomans' adaptability to different terrains and climates, demonstrating their strategic flexibility and capacity to sustain long-term military operations far from the imperial center. Ottoman-Habsburg Wars. Conflicts with the Habsburg Empire in Central Europe, particularly in Austria and Hungary, became defining struggles of the 16th and 17th centuries. The Siege of Vienna, 1529, though unsuccessful, symbolized the peak of Ottoman expansion into Europe. Subsequent wars alternated between victories and stalemates, reflecting the Ottomans' military strength, but also the increasing challenges of extended campaigns against well-organized European powers. Siege warfare techniques. The Ottomans were pioneers in siege warfare, an essential component of their military success. Siege tactics combined artillery, engineering, and psychological warfare. Artillery innovations. Massive cannons, such as the ones used to breach Constantinople's walls in 1453, revolutionized siege warfare. The Ottomans mastered the use of bombards to destroy stone fortifications previously thought impregnable. Engineering expertise. Tunnels, earthworks, and siege towers were employed to weaken defenses, protect attackers, and bypass fortifications. Naval support. In coastal sieges, Ottoman fleets provided blockade capabilities, troop transport, and bombardment from the sea. Psychological warfare. Negotiations, intimidation, and demonstrations of power often encouraged defenders to surrender, reducing casualties and preserving resources. Ottoman siege techniques were not static. They evolved in response to new fortifications, artillery technologies, and battlefield experiences. This adaptability allowed the empire to capture heavily fortified cities in Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Integration of military strategies. The Ottoman military system was remarkable for its integration of land, naval, and elite forces. Campaigns were carefully planned, utilizing cavalry for mobility and flanking maneuvers, janissaries for disciplined infantry assaults, artillery to break fortifications, naval forces to secure supply lines and support coastal operations. This combination made the Ottoman military highly effective across diverse theaters, from the mountainous Balkans to the deserts of the Middle East and the islands of the Mediterranean. It also enabled the empire to sustain prolonged wars against multiple adversaries simultaneously. Conclusion: the Ottoman military was the cornerstone of the empire's success. From early cavalry tactics to the disciplined janissaries, From Mediterranean naval dominance to revolutionary siege techniques, the Ottomans developed a versatile and sophisticated military system. Major wars against Hungary, Venice, the Safavids, and the Habsburgs showcased their strategic acumen, adaptability, and technological innovation. By combining professional infantry, elite cavalry, advanced artillery, and naval power, the Ottoman Empire maintained control over vast territories for centuries. Even as later periods revealed stagnation and the need for modernization, the military strategies and organizational principles established during the classical period remained influential, leaving a lasting legacy on global military history. The military was the backbone of the Ottoman Empire. From its foundation in the late 13th century to its peak under Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottomans relied on a highly organized and adaptable military system to expand, defend, and govern their empire. Military success was not merely a function of numbers, but stemmed from strategic organization, innovation, and integration of diverse forces. This chapter examines early cavalry and infantry strategies, the Janissary Corps, naval power, major wars, and siege warfare techniques. Early cavalry and light infantry strategies. In the early Ottoman period, cavalry formed the core of military operations. The Sipahi cavalry, elite horsemen, granted land, timar, in exchange for military service, combined speed, mobility, and archery to outmaneuver enemy forces. Cavalry was complemented by light infantry, often recruited locally, tasked with raids, ambushes, and securing supply lines. This combination allowed rapid territorial expansion across Anatolia and the Balkans, enabling the Ottomans to defeat Byzantine forces and regional rivals. The strategic mobility of cavalry and the flexibility of light infantry became hallmarks of Ottoman military practice. Janissaries and elite corps. A defining innovation was the Janissary Corps, established in the late 14th century. Recruited through the Denshirme system, Christian boys were converted to Islam and trained as elite infantry. Key features of the Janissaries included professionalism, full-time soldiers loyal to the Sultan, firearms expertise, early adopters of muskets and artillery, elite status, privileges, salaries, and integration into state administration. Political influence. Over time, Janissaries became a powerful political force. Other elite units included artillery specialists and palace guards, creating a versatile military capable of complex campaigns. Naval power in the Mediterranean. Naval power was essential for controlling trade and projecting influence. From the 15th century, the Ottomans developed a formidable navy under commanders like Barbarossa Hayreddin Pasha. Key aspects included shipbuilding. Shipyards in Istanbul, Gallipoli, and Algiers produced galleys and warships. Corsairs. Pirates allied with the Ottomans disrupted enemy trade. Naval battles. Conflicts with Venice, Spain and Portugal established Ottoman dominance in the eastern Mediterranean. Control of ports, strategic islands, and coastal cities secured trade routes and supported land campaigns. Naval power complemented land campaigns, creating an integrated military system. Major wars. The Ottomans fought several critical wars that shaped their empire. Ottoman-Hungarian Wars. From the late 14th to 16th centuries, campaigns culminated in the Battle of Mohacs, 1526, allowing Ottoman control over Hungary. Ottoman-Venetian Wars, fought over Mediterranean trade and territories like Rhodes and Cyprus, highlighting naval and siege warfare. Ottoman-Safavid Wars, battles such as Chaldiran, 1514, secured eastern Anatolia and northern Iraq, testing the Ottomans' adaptability. Ottoman-Habsburg Wars, including the Siege of Vienna, 1529, reflecting the empire's strength, but also its limitations against organized European powers. These wars demonstrated the empire's ability to conduct prolonged, coordinated campaigns on multiple fronts. Siege warfare techniques. The Ottomans excelled in siege warfare, combining artillery, engineering, and psychological tactics. Artillery. Massive cannons breached previously impregnable walls, exemplified in the conquest of Constantinople, 1453. Engineering. Tunnels, earthworks, and siege towers allowed attackers to bypass defenses. Naval support. Coastal sieges were aided by blockades and bombardments. Psychological warfare. Threats, intimidation, and negotiations often compelled surrender, minimizing casualties. Ottoman sieges were innovative and evolved in response to changing fortifications and technology. Integration of military strategies. The Ottomans integrated cavalry, janissaries, artillery, and naval forces into a coordinated system. Cavalry conducted flanking maneuvers. Janissaries executed disciplined assaults. Artillery destroyed fortifications, and naval forces secured supplies and coastal operations. This comprehensive approach enabled the empire to maintain control across Europe, Asia, and Africa. Conclusion. The Ottoman military was the foundation of the empire's power. From early cavalry tactics to elite janissaries, from Mediterranean naval dominance to advanced siege techniques, the Ottomans developed a flexible and sophisticated system capable of projecting power over vast territories. Their campaigns against Hungary, Venice, Safavid Persia, and the Habsburgs demonstrate strategic skill, adaptability, and technological innovation, even as later periods revealed military stagnation. The principles of integration, professionalization, and innovation established during the classical period left a lasting legacy in military history, influencing both European and Middle Eastern warfare. The Ottoman Empire was not only a military powerhouse, but also a hub of economic and cultural activity. Its strategic location at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa allowed it to control key trade routes and foster a diverse, vibrant society. Economic prosperity and cultural richness were mutually reinforcing. Trade and agriculture supported cities and patronage of the arts, while cultural achievements reflected political stability and wealth. This chapter explores the empire's economic foundations, trade networks, urban centers, social structure, education, literature, arts, and architecture. Economic foundations. Agriculture and land system. Agriculture formed the backbone of the Ottoman economy, employing the majority of the population. The empire relied on a timar system, where land was granted to cavalrymen, sipahis, in exchange for military service. Farmers cultivated these lands, providing food for the population and taxes for the state. Key features of the agricultural system included crop diversity. Wheat, barley, rice, cotton, and sugarcane were major staples. Irrigation and infrastructure. Canals, aqueducts, and terraces supported productivity in arid regions. Village organization. Local communities collected taxes and organized agricultural labor efficiently. This system allowed the empire to sustain its population, feed armies, and support urban growth while linking land tenure to military service. Trade and commerce. The Ottoman Empire was strategically positioned along major trade routes connecting Europe, Asia, and Africa. Istanbul, as the capital, became a central hub for commerce, linking the Mediterranean and the Silk Road. Internal trade. Caravanserais and marketplaces facilitated the movement of goods within Anatolia and the Balkans. International trade. Spices, silk, textiles, and precious metals flowed through Ottoman ports, connecting Europe, India, and the Middle East. Merchant guilds. Artisans and merchants organized into guilds, esnaf, regulating production, quality, and trade practices. Taxation and tariffs. The state profited from customs duties, market fees, and taxes on agricultural and industrial production. Control of trade routes not only generated wealth, but also allowed the Ottomans to influence European and Middle Eastern economies, making commerce a central pillar of imperial power. Urban life and cities. Ottoman cities were vibrant centers of trade, administration, and culture. Istanbul, Bursa, Edirne, Cairo, and Aleppo were among the most important urban centers. City planning. Cities were organized around mosques, bazaars, and caravanserais, combining religious, commercial, and social functions. Public services. Complexes, cullies, often included mosques, schools, hospitals, and baths, funded by charitable endowments, waqfs. Social diversity. Cities housed Muslims, Christians, Jews, and other communities, reflecting the empire's multi-ethnic and multi-religious character. Urban centers were hubs for cultural exchange, economic activity, and political administration, contributing to the cohesion and vibrancy of the empire. Arts and literature. Ottoman culture flourished under imperial patronage. Literature, poetry, and historical chronicles reflected both Islamic tradition and local influences. Poetry. Divan poetry, influenced by Persian and Arabic literature, celebrated court life, spirituality, and love. Prose and historiography. Chroniclers documented wars, administrative affairs, and daily life, preserving Ottoman history. Music. Classical Ottoman music blended Turkish, Persian, and Arabic elements, performed in courts and public ceremonies. These cultural productions reinforced social cohesion, celebrated imperial power, and shaped the identity of the Ottoman elite and broader society. Architecture. Ottoman architecture symbolized political authority, religious devotion, and aesthetic innovation. Mosques and complexes. Structures like the Suleimaniye Mosque and Blue Mosque combined religious, educational, and charitable functions. Engineering feats, bridges, aqueducts, and fortifications demonstrated technical skill and strategic planning. Urban aesthetics, courtyards, gardens, and public spaces reflected a sophisticated urban design that balanced utility and beauty. Architects like Mimar Sinan left a lasting legacy, blending Byzantine, Persian, and Islamic influences into a distinct Ottoman style. Education and learning. Education was closely linked to religion and state administration. Madrasas, religious schools, taught Islamic law, theology, and classical sciences. Endowments, waqfas, funded schools, libraries, and scholarships, ensuring access to education. Specialized instruction, training in medicine, engineering, and administration prepared students for government and military service. Education helped cultivate an administrative and scholarly elite, sustaining governance, intellectual life, and cultural achievements. Cultural integration and diversity. The empire's diversity was reflected in its cultural life. Religious communities, millets, preserved traditions, while cross-cultural interactions fostered exchange in art, cuisine, language, and dress. Festivals, public ceremonies, and religious observances strengthened communal identity while maintaining loyalty to the state. This integration of cultures allowed the empire to manage a multi-ethnic population, create economic networks across regions, and support cultural innovation. Conclusion: economic prosperity and cultural vibrancy were central to the Ottoman Empire's longevity. Agriculture provided sustenance and revenue. Trade generated wealth and influence. And cities served as centers of commerce, administration, and culture. Arts, literature, architecture, and education reflected both Islamic tradition and local innovation, creating a distinctive Ottoman identity. By integrating economic, cultural, and social systems, the empire maintained cohesion and adaptability across centuries. Even as political and military challenges emerged, the Ottoman approach to economic and cultural life ensured the resilience and continuity of imperial authority. By the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the Ottoman Empire, once a rising superpower, began to face mounting difficulties. Its vast size, complex administration, and changing global dynamics created strains that would eventually lead to decline. While the word decline is debated by historians, many prefer to see it as a period of transformation. The empire undeniably faced military stagnation, economic difficulties, administrative corruption, and challenges from both within and beyond its borders. Yet it also attempted significant reforms, showing resilience and adaptability until its final collapse in the early 20th century. Political and administrative challenges. The Ottoman political system, once tightly centralized, began to weaken. Weak sultans. After the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, 1520 to 1566, later rulers often lacked the charisma and skill of their predecessors. The imperial harem and palace officials increasingly influenced politics, giving rise to what historians call the Sultanate of Women, where powerful mothers and wives of sultans shaped state affairs. Corruption and inefficiency. The Timar system that linked land grants with military service deteriorated. Land increasingly fell into the hands of local notables who resisted central authority. Provincial autonomy. Local governors, tribal leaders, and warlords, Ion, gained significant independence, undermining the power of Istanbul. The weakening of centralized authority meant the empire struggled to maintain unity and enforce policy across its vast territories. Military stagnation. The Ottoman military, once feared for its innovative strategies and disciplined janissaries, struggled to keep pace with European rivals. Janissary decline. Originally an elite corps of slave soldiers, the janissaries became hereditary and resistant to reform. Many engaged in trade or politics rather than military service. Outdated tactics. European armies modernized rapidly during the military revolution, adopting firearms, artillery, and new strategies more effectively. The Ottomans fell behind. Major defeats. The empire suffered setbacks such as the Battle of Lepanto, 1571, where its navy was crushed by a Christian coalition, and the failed siege of Vienna, 1683, which marked the end of Ottoman expansion into Europe. Treaty losses. The Treaty of Karlowitz, 1699, forced the Ottomans to cede significant territory in Hungary to Austria, signaling the empire's waning power. These defeats revealed that the empire was no longer the unmatched military force it had been in earlier centuries. Economic difficulties. Several economic challenges deepened the empire's struggles. Shift in trade routes. The discovery of sea routes to Asia by Europeans weakened the Ottomans' role as middlemen in East-West trade. Silver crisis. The influx of cheap silver from the New World caused inflation and devalued Ottoman currency, hurting peasants and soldiers alike. Tax farming, iltizam. To raise revenue, the state increasingly relied on tax farming, where wealthy individuals paid for the right to collect taxes. This system often led to exploitation of peasants and further weakened central control. Decline in agriculture. Wars, population pressure, and corruption disrupted farming, reducing productivity and leading to rural unrest. While trade and agriculture remained vital, the Ottoman economy became less competitive compared to the rapidly industrializing economies of Europe. Social and religious challenges. Religious tension. The empire's diversity was both a strength and a challenge. Christian, Jewish, and Muslim communities lived side by side, but rising nationalism in the Balkans created friction. Peasant revolts, rural uprisings, often sparked by heavy taxation and exploitation, destabilized provinces. Intellectual stagnation. While Islamic learning flourished, the Ottomans were slow to embrace new scientific and technological developments spreading from Europe. The printing press, for example, was restricted for centuries. These social strains weakened unity and eroded the empire's ability to adapt to a changing world. European pressure and territorial losses. From the 17th century onward, European powers increasingly exploited Ottoman weakness. Habsburgs and Austrians pushed the Ottomans back in Central Europe. Russians expanded southward, seeking warm water ports, and frequently clashed with the Ottomans. Venice and other maritime rivals challenged Ottoman dominance in the Mediterranean. Nationalist revolts in the 19th century. Greece, Serbia, and other regions sought independence, often with European support. The empire was labeled the sick man of Europe in the 19th century, reflecting its vulnerability to foreign powers. Reform efforts. Despite decline, the Ottomans attempted significant reforms to modernize the state and preserve imperial authority. 17th and 18th century reforms. The Köprülü Grand Viziers restored some central authority through strong leadership. Military modernization attempts were made, though resisted by the Janissaries. 19th century Tanzimat reforms, 1839 to 1876. Legal and administrative reforms aimed to centralize authority and guarantee equality for all subjects. A modern army, postal system, and schools were established. Western-style legal codes and bureaucratic systems were introduced. Late reforms, Sultan Mahmud II, 1808 to 1839, abolished the Janissaries in 1826 during the Auspicious Incident, clearing the way for a modern army. Sultan Abdul Hamid II, 1876 to 1909, promoted railways, telegraphs, and limited constitutional reforms. These efforts to conclusion. The decline of the Ottoman Empire was the result of multiple interconnected factors: political weakness, military stagnation, economic challenges, social unrest, and relentless European pressure. Yet the empire's story was not one of sudden collapse, but rather of slow adaptation and reform efforts. While ultimately unsuccessful in preserving its great power status, the Ottoman Empire showed remarkable resilience, surviving for centuries after its so-called decline began. This period of challenges and reforms shaped the modern Middle East and southeastern Europe, leaving a legacy of cultural diversity, legal traditions, and political structures that endured even after the empire's fall in the early 20th century. The 19th century was one of the most turbulent periods in Ottoman history. By this time, the empire was no longer the dominant force of earlier centuries, but a weakened state struggling to survive amidst growing European power, rising nationalism within its territories, and internal crises. This century came to be defined by what European diplomats called the Eastern Question, the debate over what would happen to the Ottoman Empire as it declined. Despite reform efforts like the Tanzimat and the strengthening of central authority, the empire faced territorial losses, nationalist revolutions, and constant European interference, all of which paved the way to its eventual collapse in the early 20th century. Nationalism and internal revolts. One of the greatest challenges came from rising nationalism among the empire's diverse peoples. For centuries, the Ottomans had managed a multi-ethnic empire through the millet system, which allowed religious communities autonomy under their own leaders. But inspired by the French Revolution and European nationalism, subject peoples increasingly demanded independence. Serbian revolts, 1804 to 1817. These uprisings marked the first successful nationalist movement in the Balkans. With Russian support, Serbia gained autonomy, weakening Ottoman control in the region. Greek War of Independence, 1821 to 1829. Perhaps the most symbolic revolt, it was fueled by both nationalism and European romanticism. Philhellenes across Europe supported the Greeks, while Britain, France, and Russia militarily intervened, leading to Greek independence. Bulgarian, Romanian, and Albanian movements. By the mid-19th century, many Balkan peoples began organizing for autonomy or independence, often with support from rival European powers. Armenian and Arab nationalisms. Toward the late 19th century, nationalism also began rising in the empire's Asian territories, especially among Armenians seeking reform and protection, and Arabs, influenced by intellectual and religious revival movements. These nationalist revolts tore at the very fabric of the empire, making it increasingly difficult for Istanbul to maintain authority. European rivalries and the Eastern Question. The decline of the Ottoman Empire alarmed and intrigued European powers. The empire's territories, stretching across the Balkans, the Middle East, and North Africa, were strategically vital. Thus, the Eastern Question emerged. Who would inherit Ottoman lands when the empire fell? Russia, sought warm water ports on the Mediterranean and championed Orthodox Christians in the Balkans. It fought multiple wars against the Ottomans in the 19th century. Britain feared Russian expansion would threaten its route to India. Thus, Britain supported the Ottomans at times to maintain the balance of power. Britain feared Russian expansion would threaten its route to India. Thus, Britain supported the Ottomans at times to maintain the balance of power. France balanced between supporting Catholic communities in the Levant and pursuing colonial ambitions in North Africa. Austria-Habsburg Empire worried about rising Slavic nationalism as independence movements in the Balkans threatened to spread unrest within its own empire. This rivalry often meant the Ottomans survived, not because of strength, but because European powers could not agree on how to divide its territories. Territorial losses. Throughout the 19th century, the empire steadily lost territory. Egypt, 1798 to 1841. Napoleon's invasion of Egypt weakened Ottoman control, and soon the powerful governor Muhammad Ali established a virtually independent state. Greece, 1830, achieved independence after the Greek War of Independence, a major blow to Ottoman prestige. North Africa. France took Algeria in 1830. Later, Britain took Egypt, 1882, and Italy seized Libya, 1911. Balkans. Serbia, Romania, Montenegro, and Bulgaria gradually won autonomy or independence, especially after the Russo-Turkish War of 1877 to 78. Cyprus and other losses. The British took Cyprus in 1878, further eroding Ottoman influence. By the late 19th century, the Ottomans were losing their European and African possessions, leaving them increasingly confined to Anatolia. The territorial losses. Throughout the 19th century, the empire steadily lost territory. Reforms and modernization. The Tanzimat era. Despite these setbacks, the 19th century was also a time of reform. The Ottomans attempted to modernize their institutions in order to strengthen the state. Tanzimat reforms, 1839 to 1876. These reforms promised equality for all subjects, regardless of religion, modernized the army, and introduced Western-style education and legal systems. The Hat-i-Sharif of Gulhane, 1839, and the Hat-i-Humayun, 1856, proclaimed new rights and centralized authority. Administrative changes. The empire introduced modern ministries, provincial councils, and new tax systems. Military modernization. Western advisors helped reorganize the army and navy. Infrastructure. Railways, telegraphs, and modern schools were introduced, often with European assistance. While the Tanzimat reforms improved state capacity, they also faced resistance from conservative Muslims who saw them as un-Islamic, and from nationalists who wanted independence rather than equal rights within the empire. A Crimean War, 1853 to 1856. The Crimean War epitomized the Eastern question. Russia sought to extend influence over the Ottoman Empire, claiming to protect Orthodox Christians. Britain and France, however, feared Russian expansion and allied with the Ottomans. The war ended with an Ottoman, British, and French victory. The Treaty of Paris, 1856, guaranteed Ottoman territorial integrity, at least temporarily. However, a war revealed the empire's military weakness and dependence on European allies. It was a temporary reprieve, not a long-term solution. The Russo-Turkish War, 1877 to 1878, and the Treaty of Berlin. The most devastating blow of the 19th century came with the Russo-Turkish War. Russia championed Balkan nationalism, leading to war with the Ottomans. Defeat. The Ottomans suffered heavy losses, and the Treaty of San Stefano, 1878, granted vast territories to Russia and created a large, independent Bulgaria. Congress of Berlin, 1878. European powers revised the treaty, shrinking Bulgaria, but recognizing the independence of Romania, Serbia, and Montenegro. Bosnia was placed under Austrian administration. This war marked a decisive turning point. The empire lost most of its Balkan holdings and was further reduced to a secondary power, Sultan Abdulhamid II, and autocracy. The late 19th century saw the rise of Sultan Abdulhamid II, 1876 to 1909. Initially, he allowed the promulgation of a constitution and parliament, but he soon suspended them and ruled as an autocrat. Pan-Islamism. Abdulhamid sought to unite Muslims under his leadership as caliph, strengthening ties with Muslim subjects while resisting nationalism. Modernization projects. Despite his autocracy, he promoted railways, including the famous Hijaz Railway, telegraph lines, and modern education. Repression. Nationalist and opposition groups faced censorship and harsh crackdowns. While Abdulhamid delayed collapse, his rule also deepened resentment among non-Turkish groups, who increasingly turned to nationalist independence movements. By the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire faced severe internal weakness and external pressure from European powers. To counter decline, Ottoman rulers initiated a period of reform known as the Tanzimat, reorganization, spanning from 1839 to 1876. These reforms aimed to modernize the empire's administration, military, economy, and society by adopting European models while preserving Ottoman Islamic traditions. Origins of Tanzimat. The roots of reform lay in earlier attempts at modernization by Sultan Selim III and Mahmud II, who reorganized the military and sought to centralize power. However, the official launch came with the Hat-e-Sharif of Gulhane in the year 1839, proclaimed by Sultan Abdulmajid I. This decree promised subjects security of life, honor, and property, signaling a dramatic shift in governance. Administrative and legal reforms. The Tanzimat sought to strengthen the central state. Law and equality. The Hatta Humayun of 1856 declared legal equality for Muslims and non-Muslims, aiming to unify diverse communities. Secular courts. New legal codes, inspired by French civil law, supplemented Islamic courts. Provincial reforms. Governors were appointed directly by the central government, weakening local notables and increasing state control. These reforms laid the groundwork for a more modern, centralized bureaucracy. Military and economic modernization. To defend itself against European rivals, the empire restructured its military. Conscription was introduced, creating a more professional and disciplined army. Western training and technology were adopted, including modern weapons and drill systems. Economically, the empire improved tax collection, established banks, and encouraged foreign investment in railways and industry. However, dependence on European loans created financial vulnerability. Education and social changes. The Tanzimat era expanded education to cultivate a skilled, modern bureaucracy. Secular schools were founded alongside traditional madrasas, teaching science, languages, and administration. Printing presses spread literacy and reformist ideas. New elites emerged, educated bureaucrats, intellectuals, and journalists who later pushed for constitutionalism and nationalism. Social reforms also addressed minorities. The recognition of non-Muslim rights allowed Armenians, Greeks, and Jews greater participation in politics and commerce, though tensions between communities persisted. Impact and limitations. The Tanzimat reforms modernized key aspects of the empire, but faced resistance. Conservative factions opposed Western-inspired laws. Nationalist movements among Greeks, Serbs, and Bulgarians grew stronger, demanding independence rather than integration. Financial dependency on Europe increased Ottoman vulnerability to foreign influence. Nevertheless, the Tanzimat transformed the empire's identity. It marked the beginning of Ottoman modernity, blending Islamic tradition with European institutions. The decline of the Ottoman Empire was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual weakening that spanned the 18th to early 20th centuries. Once a global superpower, the empire struggled with military defeats, nationalist uprisings, and European imperial pressure. By the late 17th century, the failed Siege of Vienna, 1683, marked the beginning of territorial retreat. The empire lost Hungary and much of Eastern Europe to the Habsburgs, while Russia expanded southward, threatening Ottoman control of the Black Sea. Repeated wars drained resources and revealed the weakness of the once dominant Janissary Corps. In the 19th century, the empire was called the sick man of Europe. Nationalist revolts, such as the Greek War of Independence, 1821 to 1830, and uprisings in the Balkans, shattered imperial authority. Meanwhile, European powers carved out influence. Britain and France sought to control trade routes, while Russia posed as protector of Orthodox Christians. Despite the Tanzimat reforms, internal corruption, administrative inefficiency, and growing debt weakened modernization efforts. The empire's dependence on European loans led to financial bankruptcy by 1875, forcing foreign powers to control its revenues. World War I dealt the final blow. The Ottomans, allied with Germany, faced defeat by 1918. Arab revolts, fueled by British promises of independence, tore away Ottoman lands in the Middle East. Following the Treaty of Sèvres, 1920, the empire was dismantled, and most territories were divided among victorious Allied powers. In 1923, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk abolished the Sultanate and proclaimed the Republic of Turkey, marking the end of more than 6 centuries of Ottoman rule. The fall of the empire symbolized the end of medieval imperial tradition and the birth of modern nation-states in the Middle East and Balkans. The story of the Ottoman Empire is not just a tale of rise and fall. It is a reminder of how power, culture, and innovation can shape entire civilizations. If you enjoyed this journey through history, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Drop a comment with the empire, leader, or event you'd like me to cover next. Your suggestion could shape our next adventure into history.